So we'll continue reading Chapter 4 of Transactionalism by Trevor J. Phillips. The value qualities of experience. The term purposive activity has been employed several times in the foregoing discussion. For Cantrill, this is action capable of bringing a value quality or attribute to experience. This unique capacity of man to experience value qualities is his most important characteristic, which, when understood, throws much light on the nature of his daily transactions. This capacity to sense value in the quality of his experience is, transactionalists emphasize, unique to man. The value quality permeates all human wants, urges, desires, and aspirations. Further, man is able to sense qualitative differences in his experiences. The value quality of a particular experience is sensed in terms of value expectations or value standards registered through previous transactions. That is, such value standards are products of the life history of each person. What any person believes will bring forth an enriched experience depends almost entirely on what his present value standards are. But irrespective of one's group identifications, it seems to be characteristic of man to strive within those groups to better his status in his own eyes and in the eyes of others who share his standards. Value qualities or feelings of richness in experience may arise from any creative work that is undertaken. Food eaten simply to satisfy hunger, or a meal partaken of to satisfy the fastidious appetite of the gourmet, may be said to give rise to value qualities of low and high order, respectively. Negative value qualities also pervade experience, as, for example, of disillusionment, sadness, and moments of general depression. The concept of sensed value quality undoubtedly is helpful in explaining the aesthetic facet of man's nature. Cantrill conceded, however, that taken alone it will not account for other facets, such as man's curiosity, or for his need to develop and grow. So it would seem that there is a more generalized goal to which man aspires, which is what Cantrill has called the enhancement of the value quality of experience. He stated that it can be thought of as the top standard of human experience, a standard in its own right. It is the capacity man has to sense added value in his experience that accounts for his ceaseless striving, for a direction to his activities, for his characteristic unwillingness to have things remain as they are. For the transactional psychologist, then, behavior is not manifested merely for the sake of behaving. Man seeks either the value satisfactions he experiences in the behavior, or the satisfactions he derives from accomplishing a particular purpose, a searching which is actually a step toward the fulfillment of further purposes and the production of still greater satisfactions. Behavior and purpose must therefore be viewed as aspects of experience, components of a total situation, not as elements with independent existences. The role of assumptions. An understanding of man's nature from the transactional point of view cannot be reached without also investigating his assumptions, or what is termed man's assumptive world. Belonging neither to the person nor to the environment, assumptions like behavior and purpose are to be regarded as having their existence in the total context of the full organism environmental situation. The reality of a particular situation depends, transactionally speaking, on the interpretation placed upon the situation by a particular person. Interpretation is possible only through the accumulation of experience, which, in effect, is what is meant by assumptions. Man is built by where he has been, and what he has done. And in the process of building himself, he comes to know only that world which is thereby created, his assumptive world. And from it, man derives his feelings of constancy, certainty, and predictability. According to Ames, the nature of the assumptive world can be understood, that is to say, its presence made aware of, only when in the course of daily living one runs into hitches and discovers that some aspect or aspects of his assumptive world have proven inadequate or invalid. The following account by Ames, one of his demonstrations, illustrates this latter point. Let us consider the phenomenal process that takes place when, in an actual occasion, one's actions disclose the invalidity of aspects of one's assumptive world. The situation is exemplified in a demonstration where there are two similar objects of different size at the same distance which are seen at different distances. When one tries with a stick to touch quickly first one object, then the other, one is unable to do so. One's inability immediately to accomplish this apparently simple action discloses that one's actions are denying the validity of one's assumptions, that similar things are identical. With practice, one learns to perceive the two similar objects not of the same size and at different distances, but of different sizes at the same distance, which they actually are. In this process, he alters his assumptions that similar things are identical. He comes to realize through experiential action that his assumption that similar things are identical was not valid. That is, he has altered the form of his assumptive world. The question that must now be raised is, what is to be the subject's response in the next situation? What will he assume? Because his assumption that similar things are identical has such a high probability of reliability, he cannot relinquish it completely. Ames suggested that the subject is to be likened to the person who assumes men are honest, but who has in the past been the victim of petty criminality because of this assumption. If he changes the form of his assumptive world and assumes men are crooks, he will be less successful in carrying out his purposes than if he assumes they are honest, which most men are. So it is with the example of the subject in the above experiment and the two objects observed. The subject cannot afford to reject the prognostic reliability of his perceptions, or to disregard the probability of success of his actions in carrying out his purposes. All he can do is to continue to act upon those assumptions which work best in the long run. Although each person brings his assumptive world to his immediate present, this cannot disclose to him those undetermined significances which are continually emerging as he engages in the transactions of living. It is, of course, these constantly emerging significances, or new factors, which constitute the stuff out of which the individual continually recreates his world. A characteristic of man's assumptions that transactionalists, along with Peirce, James, and Dewey, find significant is their implicit future reference. For example, assumptions are made that with the advent of summer, hot, humid weather will prevail, that the touching of a steaming kettle will result in burnt fingers. This implicit future reference provides what Cantrill and Bumstead have termed sequential significance, and constitutes the world of expectancies, through which man is able to give a reasonable account of his illusions, surprises, and disappointments, as well as of hopes and fears, joys and sorrows. To assert that assumptions have reference to the future is, in reality, only to rephrase Ames' classic dictum already cited, that perceptions are implicit prognostic directives for action, probabilities for which action or some potential action might be undertaken. Any particular transaction of living involves, to a greater or lesser degree, a set of conditions that present a problem for choice or action. Whether or not the problem is solved adequately depends upon the pattern of assumptions brought to bear and upon their appropriateness to cope with contingencies. Of particular importance is the fact that only by working through the problems can we build up more inclusive and more appropriate assumptions for future occasions. The significance of the assumptive world to each individual is fundamental to transactional theory and practice. Granted that each perceives from his own unique point of view, what he perceives becomes meaningful as he interprets and predicts in terms of his assumptions. It is possible here to draw a distinction between knowledge and understanding, to the degree that the former implies information. For only by acting on one's assumptions, acting for a purpose, that is, on the basis of one's knowledge, does one acquire understanding or meaningfulness. The transactional line of reasoning may thus be expressed as follows. The assumptive world of each individual is composed of the sum total of the assumptions which he makes concerning the nature and significance of his external world, and which are derived from his experiences, that is, his transactions with his environment. His perceptions at any particular present are determined by his assumptive world, which provides him with his prognostic directives. A person's assumptive world is literally the only world he knows. It is his assumptions that enable him to derive meaning from the process of living. As has been seen, much of this meaning develops as man attempts to validate reality, that is, to test the prognostic directives which the various interdependent aspects of perception have proffered. The concept of assumptive world provides transactionalists with an instrument with which to redefine scientific methodology. The hitches encountered because of inadequate understanding of the conditions giving rise to a particular phenomenon and the subsequent inability to act effectively for a purpose cause the investigator to attempt to grasp intellectually the reasons for the blockage. When such attempts are made to get at the why of the ineffectiveness of purposeful action, there is being adopted the attitude of scientific inquiry. The highly important part that action plays in the reality testing process has already been inferred. It will now be considered in greater detail.